Hello, and welcome to our weekly dialogue with Helga Zepp-LaRouche. She is the founder and chairwoman of the Schiller Institute. Today is November 6th, 2024. I'm Harley Schlanger, and I'll be your host. You can send your questions and comments to Helga at questions@schillerinstitute.org, or you can post them in the chat page. Helga, yesterday, former President Donald Trump was elected again to be President of the United States. He defeated Vice President Kamala Harris, who had been selected by the party establishment after they decided to put Joe Biden into an early retirement through what many called a soft coup. In other words, sacrifice Biden to save the policy. Well, it appears it didn't work. Caitlin Johnstone commented on this in her unique way. She said that it, quote, turns out campaigning on the promise of continuing a genocide while courting endorsements from war criminals like Dick Cheney is not a great way to get progressives to vote for you, unquote. Now, Helga, when you were looking at the developments of the recent days, you said, our moment in history is here. The old system is crumbling, and this means this is the chance for a new system. So how should our viewers think about the developments of the last week, including the election of Donald Trump?
Well, I think, it's definitely a moment of a break in a very tense strategic situation. Trump has promised to stop wars. Now, obviously, we have to see if the words are followed by deeds, but also Vance, his vice president, said something similar. So I would take the attitude, he's a newly elected president, and let's see if he follows through with his promises. Now, obviously, the key question is not only what he does inside the United States, but naturally the foreign policy is crucial. I think he will do something to bring the Ukraine war to an end. I think there is a potential for that, even if the Russians are very cautious, which is understandable given their point of view. But I think that potential exists. I'm not so optimistic concerning Southwest Asia, but I think the really crucial question is what will be the attitude of the Trump administration to the efforts by the global majority to build a new economic system. And I would just hope that, there are enough voices internationally who, show the potential. The initial reaction from the Chinese, from Mao Ning, the spokeswoman of the foreign ministry, was that the Chinese position is basically one of offering a win-win cooperation. And, given the fact that Xi Jinping already several years ago had offered to Obama that the Obama administration should cooperate with the BRICS and the Belt and Road Initiative, to which Obama reacted very negatively by putting the pivot Asia instead. But that offer obviously still exists. And, given the fact that the countries of Hungary and Slovakia, who are very interested in ending the Ukraine war, because it's a neighbor country and it's a terrible thing to have such a war in their neighborhood, are also on a very positive course with China. I think there is a potential to end the Ukraine war and to build bridges. I think that the countries of the global south who have proven in Kazan that they are definitely determined to move in the direction of a more just and equitable new world economic order, I think they also will see the opportunity. And I could very well imagine that many of them are reaching out to the Trump new government to see out if there can be a positive attitude be arranged. Now, that may be as it be. I can only say that our task, that of the LaRouche organization, the Schiller Institute, basically, is that we have to use the moment to really catapult the world situation into a new paradigm, a new security and development architecture, because, I've said this repeatedly, and it's more true than ever before, that if we do not overcome geopolitics, which is the Wolfowitz doctrine, which is the idea, the Wolfowitz doctrine even demanding, that the US should remain the hegemon of the world forever, but also geopolitics, which is the idea that one nation or a group of nations have the right to, impose their interest over other nations. That thinking has to go, especially in the time of thermonuclear weapons. And I think that, we have to really use this present situation to try to move out of this present extremely dangerous zone. How dangerous it is underlined by the fact that just hours before the election result was known, the United States launched a Minuteman ICBM missile test, which is nuclear capable, to demonstrate the nuclear readiness of the United States. Now, I think this is, just shows you that the mindset of the present administration is still in the old paradigm, and that is exactly where the problem is located. So I think that the next period will be extremely dangerous. I think that the period until the inauguration of Trump remains one of utmost suspense and danger, and naturally even beyond that. But I think, if one can hope that what Trump said he will do, naturally one has to watch very carefully what cabinet he is putting together. If it's people who will insist, as Trump himself had said during the election campaign, that he wants to split the relationship between Russia and China, which I think has zero chances, given the fact that the reason why these two countries have moved together so closely has everything to do with the strategic dangers. So I don't think there is any chance to split these two countries, but it would be very unfortunate if the message coming from the new Trump administration would be that he indeed wants to go in that direction. If on the other side, there is a concerted effort to try to move the world into a better place, and that's what our upcoming Schiller conference is all about, to establish a new security and development architecture which takes into account the interest of every single country in the tradition of the Peace of Westphalia. We are possibly on the verge of a completely new era, but it does require a lot of efforts by a lot of people of goodwill. So, I'm on the one side, optimistic that something big can be done, but on the other side, it would be a fatal mistake to put down the alarms, because we are not out of a danger zone in the slightest, and therefore I think it does still require a maximum mobilization of people who are fighting for peace.
You mentioned the upcoming Schiller conference, which will be the 7th and 8th of December. People should look for the announcement for that on the schillerinstitute.com page, and we should have that out shortly. Now, Helga, I spoke with an elected official in Germany today who said that he sees the Trump victory as good news, but with some problems. And you basically referred to that. But what he said in particular is the two big problems. One, potential opposition to the BRICS from President Trump. And secondly, support for Netanyahu's genocide against the Palestinians. And he asked, what do you think can be done to change the direction in these two issues?
Well, I think that the countries of the global south are not passive players or partners or entities. They are on the move. the countries who came together in Kazan represented 4.7 billion people and 57% of the global majority. And there are about 30 more countries who have expressed interest to join the BRICS. So I don't think that these countries will, just wait out and see what Trump does. I think they will also reach out and make clear what their interest is. And, I think, the West is really at the point where rethinking is urgently required. I mean, first of all, Trump probably will go in the direction of tariffs against China, tariffs against the European Union. I think this will not go without frictions if he remains on that level. In Europe, for example, the media this morning were quite amazing. There were commentators saying that this is the end of democracy. Obviously, Trump was just democratically elected. Two houses of the Congress are now Republican, which is not exactly a sign that democracy doesn't function. I mean, this is a democratic vote. So why is democracy at the end? If there were some problems in the election, obviously, like our independent candidate for Senate, Diane Sayre, was only given half of the votes of the number of people who had signed to put her on the ballot, and her voting tallies were 0.5% without any vacillation for the entire duration of the election day, which is completely statistically impossible because normally these results go up and down depending, where the vote is. So I'm not saying that there are no problems with that outcome, but I think that the countries of the global South are on the move. They want to have a new, just, equitable world economic system which allows them to overcome underdevelopment. And I could very well imagine that, since there are many leaders who have very clear ideas about the future, such as the presidents of Brazil, Indonesia, India, China, Nigeria, South Africa, and many others, that I can very well imagine that they will also intervene in the situation and put their wishes on the table. And then the United States has to think, do they want to cut off relation to the global majority, or do they want to have a positive relationship? Now, the Biden administration for sure was for decoupling, which Global NATO, which would mean basically economic and political and military decoupling, and the world being split into two separate blocks, which would be devastating for the world economy. And I don't think it would be good for America. It would not be good for Europe either. So I think this period of the next 3 months will be used by practically all sides, to try to, put their system on the table. But the global majority is the global majority. And for the collective West, if they cut off relationship with the only area of the world economy which is really growing, which is China, and in terms of demographic growth, it's Africa, they would really shoot themselves in their own knee. So I think this is a period where the history can be shaped, and therefore I think it's not the last word to listen to those people who are trying to read the leaves of a past chapter of history.
You're listening to Helga Zepp-LaRouche, the founder and chairwoman of the Schiller Institute. We have some very interesting questions for you, Helga. Here's one from Takis Ioannidis, who writes, a new president of the U.S. was elected. Europe has been destroyed by the Ukraine war. Citizens in all countries suffer. The quality of life is low. The European Union plans for immigrants have failed miserably. And he says Germany is mainly responsible for the failure. Then he asks, is there a chance now for Europe to cooperate properly with the U.S. for the end of the war and the recovery of our life, and how it can be achieved? So that's the question for you.
Well, let's see what happens. If you look at the initial responses from even von der Leyen warmly greeting President Trump for his victory. Now let's see if that warm atmosphere remains. But I think Prime Minister Orban from Hungary has already expressed great expectations. I think there are many others who have expressed likewise, or even just formal, polite welcomes. And this is a moment where you can put a new policy on the table, and I think everybody would do well to review why was the world coming to this crisis point. All the policies the US and European nations have been complaining about was a blowback to their own policy. The neoliberal model just did not function. In a certain sense, this vote of President Trump really has certain echoes of his being elected in 2016, which at that time was a worldwide rejection of the neoliberal paradigm. The BRICS, Brexit was part of it. The vote against the change of the constitution in Italy, another one. Worldwide demonstrations. So in a certain sense, this present Trump vote again was the result that people reject the war policy, they reject woke policies, and in a certain sense, it is a moment where one can forcefully put a different agenda on the table. So I don't look at it as something passively, but if people in Europe who like the Trump election, they should reach out to the Trump administration or coming into being administration. And, this is a time, to really try to put a better policy on the table. If the West wants to have good relations to the global South, well, it is very easy. They should stop the policy of confrontation. They should offer cooperation and basically say, Europe has a lot of science and technology capacity still, one must say. The United States does so to a certain extent because most of their capacity is unfortunately in the military sector, which needs to be reconverted. But, if there would be a joint policy to say, let's build up Africa and Latin America and Asian countries which are not yet so developed, and help them to become middle-level income countries in the short term by building up infrastructure, developing agriculture, industrial parks, fast trains, energy grids, energy distribution, desertification, to combat the deserts by providing new fresh water through desalination of nuclear plants, all of these projects, and that way create a situation where the migrants don't want to migrate anymore because they would have a good reason to stay home and build up their own country. Would that not be the way to solve the migrant question? Is that not something the Trump administration could pick up on, and rather than trying to subdue any Chinese investments like the Shanghai port in Peru, they would say, let's cooperate in building the Bi-Oceanic Railroad and other key infrastructure projects in Latin America, and that way the migrants would stay home. Wouldn't that be better than building a wall, where many people are, dying on the way to reach a wall to just be then. I mean, unfortunately, Trump's impulse will probably be to be very hard on the migrants. But I think if all the Latin American countries and African countries and others would basically approach the Trump administration and say, look, we want to solve the migrant problems, but not by building a wall and then leaving the people in between hanging there, dying and being miserable, being denied their basic human rights, but by changing the policy, cooperate. Why cannot the United States and China cooperate in building up the Latin American economy and do likewise with the Europeans for Africa? I mean, it would be so easy. And I'm not naive or blue-eyed, but I know for sure, and I, would really bet my whole existence on that if there would be a gesture coming from the collective West in the direction I'm saying now, the African countries, the Asian countries, the Latin American countries, the BRICS countries would immediately agree. So why don't we all work towards that end? Because that's the only way how to resolve this crisis.
And here's a question for you from a contact from Ohio. He wrote, "The media just doesn't get it. In all the articles and commentary I've heard today about the election, none identified the support for endless wars as contributing to the election victory of Trump. I consider this psychological warfare." And he asked for your comments on this.
Well, it is obviously psy-war, but it also reflects, I have asked myself many times, why is it that the establishments of the West are not capable of reflecting that their policies have failed? I mean, normally, when you see that you're trying to do something and it doesn't work, like, for example, the humanitarian interventions, trying to export the liberal Western model of democracy in Iraq, in Afghanistan, in Libya, in wherever, and it did not function anywhere. The result is that the influence of the United States in Southwest Asia, as a result of these interventionist wars, has shrunk to the lowest level, in the entire period. And you would think, for example, in Germany, they participated in the Afghanistan war because we once had a defense minister who said that German freedom is defended at the Hindu Kush. You remember how shameful the withdrawal of NATO from Kabul was in 21? You would think that they reflect on why did this not function. And maybe there is here and there somebody who, realized that this was a wrong policy, because you cannot go into a culture of a completely different background, totally different civilization, sometimes several thousands of years old, and then try it with a few soldiers who hardly leave their camp, try to impose democracy. It's doomed to failure from the very beginning. And I think the reason why these establishments are not willing to reflect on that is because, they think that their entire position, privilege, money, income, all of that depends on the narrative they have all adopted as a club. And therefore they stick to it, even if it doesn't, function anymore. But, I have only the image of Honecker, who at the 40-year celebration of the GDR, basically said, socialism will stay 1,000 years and not ox nor donkey will stop it. Well, it was less than 2 weeks or so, 12 days, I think, before Honecker resigned, and 3 weeks until the Berlin Wall came down. If an establishment is not willing to realize that their policies don't function, then I think the principles of what is in the Declaration of Independence written comes into effect, namely that if a people endures a bad government for a very long time, then when no other means is functioning, they have the duty to change the government. Now, we just saw with the Trump election such a reflection of this policy, and therefore I think it would be a moment for other people who are not in one of the two camps, but who are in the institutions, who are in the permanent bureaucracy, to really think, would it not be the moment to return to the better traditions of every country, both in the United States and in Europe? Because we have left our way, we lost our way, and it's urgent time to restore a better policy, in the best traditions each of us have.
Now, here's a question from Israel. Netanyahu fired his defense minister Gallant, saying that he's lost trust in him. Gallant cited Netanyahu's failure to present a post-war plan and his unwillingness to set up a commission of inquiry into October 7th as two major reasons for tension between them. So he writes, some in Israel are speculating that Netanyahu was acting to preempt a move by some in the Israel Defense Forces in coordination with the US officials in Washington to bring down his government. What do you think?
Well, I'm not privy to such information, but the timing where Netanyahu fired Gallant is obvious. You know, in the middle of the US election, obviously he thought or hoped that, you know, the US would be, you know, paying attention to other things. I think that the situation of Israel is terrible, and, you know, the many commentators basically say that what is happening is a serious threat to the existence of Israel. So I can only say that I can only hope that the voices of reason in Israel become stronger and manifest themselves.
Now, here's a question from Professor Larafy, who asks, do you think the US and Russia could move toward a thaw, which could include building a new arms control and disarmament policy, which would stabilize international relations?
Well, given the fact that Trump himself was the one who canceled many of such agreements, one can only hope that there is a rethinking. You know, I think the urgency to move to such new agreements is more urgent than ever before. But, you know, as I said, everything really depends on what kind of administration he is putting together. And I can only say that, you know, the more people speak out and try to make their voice heard in this period of you know, consolidation, the more important their influence can be.
And here's a question from Christopher Cruz from the Philippines. Is it feasible that the BRICS could create a financial system modeled on Lyndon LaRouche's idea of a new Bretton Woods?
Yes, obviously. I mean, at the Kazan meeting, there was an effort to move in this direction, and they did not go all the way in doing that. And the basic reason is that, you know, several of the member countries of the BRICS have their own supposed interest, you know, wanting to have a foot in each camp. So they only went, what I think is a flanking operation, by basically calling for a BRICS investment fund platform, a grain fund, a grain platform, and similar things. But, you know, given the fact that it was Paulo Batista, the former deputy head of the New Development Bank, who said that the IMF is unreformable, while, you know, several countries said that they want to reform the IMF, the World Bank, and so forth. No, I think the four laws of Lyndon LaRouche remain the absolute non plus ultra, namely that you have to get rid of the overhang of the 4 quadrillion outstanding derivative debt, the several hundred trillion of public debt, and public and private debt, and that as long as you remain in this indebted system, there is no way how the West could join a new financial architecture. So I think the 4 laws of Lyndon LaRouche, that you have to have a Glass-Steagall banking separation, that the investment banks have to take care of their books themselves without bailout packages of various kinds, and that you then have to move to protect the commercial banks, that you have to set up national banks, that you have to connect these national banks with clearing houses to set up a new credit system. All of these steps are relatively easy, and I think that would be the way to create the condition, for the collective West to join the BRICS fully in a new economic system. Now, if the countries of the West have the wisdom to move in this direction, I think it depends a lot on an intelligent electorate and state citizens who step forward or change the governments as they are, which is right now, has been the case in recent elections a lot, also in Germany, in France, and elsewhere. So I think it remains an organizing task. And again, that's why we have put the new Schiller Institute conference beginning of December, where this new development and security architecture is one of the key foci, and the 10 principles I have suggested which should be considered by such a new security architecture are really the basis of such a discussion. So please read these and join our conference and help us organizing for it to make it an outstanding event, because we set the date in such a way that it should intervene in the present situation in as many countries around the world as possible, because we need to bring forth the best of all people to solve this crisis.
Now, Madeline, who's monitoring the chat page, reports that many people are saying they're happy that Trump won. One example, Diana Shaler from Canada writes, good morning, Helga and Harley. Congratulations to the American people and President Trump. What a fantastic win for freedom. The people have spoken. I'm so happy today, and I'm not even American. This was a win for the world. Now, another woman wrote in who is a regular on the International Peace Coalition calls, and she said, in listening to what you're saying, I have one message. Get on the phone and build the attendance for this week's Zoom call. The IPC has been instrumental in the change that's underway. So with that, Helga, what's on tap for this Friday's call?
Well, I can tell you that we are organizing for the Friday call, but also already for the Schiller conference beginning of December. And we have an enormous interest of top people. So please understand that this is an extraordinary possibility to put together an international coalition. The IPC meeting this Friday, for sure, will discuss the implication of the outcome of the Trump victory in the United States and what needs to be done by international forces to help. So get on this call, and I can only fully endorse what you just said. Get on the phone, organize all your friends, all your colleagues, and this is the moment where we can actually shape history. So that is what we should do.
I think in posing the question, she anticipated that would be your answer. So Helga, thanks for joining us today. I'm sorry for my voice, but I think it's important that people get these updates every single week. So see you on Friday.
Yeah, and you get better. Get you better your health.